of the notion of pure control. And Pasteur brings this to his vaccine studies, to his study of bacteriology, and pasteurize the world. It's Pasteur's methods that set the model of not only thinking about the world and its measurement and its containment and its pasteurization, but also the model for the modern research laboratory that is based on pure science that might have some relationship to production, but not entirely reduced to production. And here is the first modern laboratory as we know it. And it was the one that Pasteur established in the Whitbread Brewery laboratories of the Whitbread Brewery I showed from just a few slides ago. And you notice the date, 1871. The Whitbread laboratory is the model for all modern large-scale laboratories. And it is the flagship laboratories, not only here in Whitbread, but also in one of the French allies, the Carlsberg Brewery in Copenhagen in Denmark, that we see the greatest discoveries of the turn into the 20th century. And it is Pasteur who inspires and sets up the Carlsberg Laboratory, funded by the big brewery of Carlsberg in Copenhagen, the largest laboratory in the world, financed by a brewery. Now, here in this particular laboratory, we'd see the discovery of phages, the work on phages, the fundamental work on hybridity of the gene, Hansen's work on the origins of yeast and the pure strains, and much of the work on the development of modern genetics. But also what happens in the Carlsberg laboratory. I'd usually ask if we could have a question period right now, but you all know that it's in the Carlsberg laboratory that we find Niels Bohr and his team working on quantum mechanics, and especially the specific, peculiar Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics done in a laboratory in a brewery. And it's certainly working in a brewery. I thought about this while I was not noting down these notes. It's working in a brewery is going to help if you're trying to understand quantum mechanics, because you really do have to be half pissed to really understand quantum mechanics fully. And so not only being in a brewery laboratory, but the proximity of the beer maybe helped out in creating that very strange thing, the Copenhagen interpretation. So, okay, here. In this site, right here in the Carlsberg laboratory, all of modernity collects. To brewing, we owe much of this modernity. We owe more than I could talk about in this lecture. Hygiene, the idea of the modern forensic testing comes from brewing. The regimes of taxation, accounting, the idea of a public sphere outside of government happens not in the coffee shop, but in the pubs associated with brewing. And of course, the modern surveillance state all have their origins in brewing. But at the same time, we in late modernity, we see a pendulum move, a reaction against this modernity and it's kind of Charlie Chaplinite modern times of the modern industrial production and state. In the last 10 or 20 years, we've seen a reaction against this kind of industrial brewing and the growth and recovery of craft beers. We see especially this in Nova Scotia. It's huge here. The growth has probably been per pop bigger than anywhere else. So we're seeing a resurrection of Cobbett's cottage economy. This scares the industrialists, and they're now producing their very own craft beer, which is kind of, I know, ironic or funny. But craft beer movement is a bit of a dream, a kind of lapsarian hope for the pre-industrial era of brewsters the end of Brit Frizz, as they describe it in Britain, the real ale, to which I'm going to hold in the last minutes, we can never return. For we can see now, even the craft brewers measure, calculate, control, reconfigure, check the temperature, pasteurize, keep inside, controlled, measured, control the inputs and outputs. They have no relationship to the brewsters and the craft brewers of a day gone by. We live on this side of the science with with no possibilities of return to the alewife of lore. So we all live in a world. In last minutes, I'll say we all live in the world created by beer and science. All of modernity owes its origins to beer. So thanks and cheers. I'll leave up for a second or two while we try to get here some beer facts, but maybe we can discuss these in the discussion period. And I hope I've kept pretty close to time.